quick ooh, as quickly as possible to the adoration part, which I think is the most important part of today. So, okay, if you're joining us for chapter 6 of our book, Clare of Assisi, A Heart Full of Love by Ilia Delio. So we're on chapter 6, which is called Transformation. But before I start talking about that, I'll just give a brief summary of what's going to happen today. Okay, so today's structure will be, I haven't timed myself, but I think I should be 10 minutes or under, hopefully, for the summary of the chapter. Wow, amazing. And then we'll move to adoration. So this will be like 20 to 30 minutes. I think for people who are here with us, thanks for coming in person, then we can go and see Jesus in person. We're going to go down to Saints Peter and Paul, the adoration chapel there. And for people who are on Zoom, there's still an option for you because Vanessa is going to help us share the live stream adoration from the cathedral. Okay. If you want to take, so once we hit down, we'll all just stay, and then it's kind of like own time, own target. Like if you want to come back in 20 minutes, you can. If you need to step out for a while, like no one's going to be like, oh, you stepped out. No, like just you can step out for a while. There's a toilet at SVP as well. If you want to stay the full 30 minutes, you can stay the full 30 minutes. But Adoration Chapel at SPP closes at 9 p.m. So you can't stay past that lah. Yeah. Live stream adoration still going on. So like if you want to perpetually adore, you may perpetually adore. Yes. And then once we come back, we'll have time for sharing. So the people online can share in a sharing group, and then everyone in person will just sort of split up and share. Yeah. Okay, so that's the structure for today. Ideally, we are done at 9:10. No, 9:15. 9:15. Hey, okay. So I give back 15 minutes to you guys. Great. Okay. So, okay, this is part of the reason why I'm able to do the session really fast. Because actually, today's chapter, don't laugh, Nicole. Actually, today's chapter, it's a revision of what we've already covered. In essence. Okay, so we'll try to keep to just the essence here, because I think the real proof is in the pudding. The real substance of the session will be through our actual contemplation with adoration. Okay, so in chapter 6, Ilia Delio reminds us again that transformation and contemplation are linked together in the Christian life, and this is linked together by St. Clare, but it's also linked together in the spiritual life in general. And the link being that contemplation is the means of transformation, and transformation should be the goal of our contemplation. So I think we've covered in previous sessions that contemplation in other traditions may not necessarily be explicitly linked to transformation, but to St. Clare it is. So during the summary, I mean, this is a very teacher thing for me to say, like during the summary, please pay attention to this. Okay, you can pay attention whatever you want, okay, because you're adults. But yeah, I mean, if anything really like sticks out to you, then maybe that's something you can continue thinking about in contemplation as well. Okay, great. So first thing covered in the chapter is why transformation, since the chapter is specifically focused on it. And I found two quotes that I thought were very insightful. So the first being that the genius of the saints, and St. Clare in particular, would be that saints don't settle for anything less than the ultimate. Here, the ultimate goal of life itself, right? Which is union with God. So if we ask why transformation, it's because we want to be in union with God. And in attaining this contemplation and in attaining a level of transcendent love, we become, she says, perhaps what we've always wanted to be, a human being fully alive. And I think as we sort of go through the world, I think that's what all of us want. I mean, to be fully alive, to be fully actualized, you know, to be all that you can be. And here, Ilia Delio is saying that a human being fully alive is a human being in union with God. Okay, so we went over why transformation. Now we go to why contemplation. Okay, So why contemplation? So I mentioned already that the link between transformation and contemplation is that transformation takes place through contemplation. In order to transform into something, you have to know what you want to transform into. But the second thing is that contemplation is itself good, right? It's dwelling in love and dwelling in this desire that we have for God, right? This desire for union with God, but also the desire that God has to dwell in us. And finally, real love transforms us, and love unites us. So it transforms because it unites. Yeah. But at the same time, when we're united with God, it's not the same way that like two things disappear into each other and one becomes the other, or vice versa. As in, we do become like God and we do become divinized, but at the same time we also become more ourselves. And that's like a mysterious part of this union with God, that you can be in union with him without him like swallowing you up and then you disappearing into nothing. Yeah. Okay, so now we go to what is transformation. So there's a part of this chapter where Elia talks about the word form and the word transformation, and I didn't fully understand it. Okay, so her argument is form is the concrete expression of the inner content or image of something. So when you transform, your concrete expression changes, right? And so then she says it's like becoming the image of the one you love, being changed in your way of being a person. So it's external in that sense. Like it isn't just something that's happening within you and then no one sees it. There are fruits to it. And then she says become a new incarnation of the word inside and out. And she seems to make some distinction between the fact that our form is changing, so our way of being a person is changing, but our genetic material isn't. So I mean, if that metaphor works for you, then like go with it. But I was a bit like, okay, but genetic material, question mark. Anyway, yeah, so I got a little confused, but hopefully you didn't. Yeah. Okay. So we're really breezing through this. So we're on to who brings about transformation. So I don't know if this is a question that you guys have, but it's a question that I always have, which is this tension between like, so whose responsibility is it? So when I say like, I want to transform, is it me that needs to bring it about? Or is it God? So I just sit here and then hope that God like transforms me. So you can probably tell from the way that I'm phrasing this that it's both. But at the same time, it's not both. Okay, so we're going to get into that. So the first thing of who brings about transformation is that it's actually all God. Okay, so what I mean here by the primacy of God's grace is that it's actually all God. And God is the first actor in this. And so I picked out this quote from the chapter, which is, Clare, like many saints, understood the power of God in the midst of weak humanity. So a section of this chapter talks about, again, I think revising a theme that we've heard before about poverty, which is that we're not able to, when we look at the cross, we're not able to on our own kind of like sort of summon our human powers and become like that. And I think the more you contemplate the cross, the more I feel the gulf between me in my weak humanity and God and Jesus. So I think the more you delve into that, the more it's obvious to you that it cannot just be done by you. So she, like many saints, or like other saints, realized that only God can bring forth life from death, which is a strange way of thinking about it, because you're like, I'm alive, so it's not life from death, but actually it's life from death, because the transformation required of you is as great as that. And Clare's insight into the power of God in the midst of suffering and death turned her heart towards this Christ, and the Christ that's crucified, but yet the promise of life through that. And all of this is to say that this is God's action in us, and it has to be God's action in us, or we can't do it on our own. Yeah. So, okay, but I did mention that like the answer to who brings about transformation might be both, right? Okay, so we're going to get to the second part. So I phrase this as like the necessity of our free cooperation, but I think cooperation might be giving ourselves a bit too much credit. But anyway, I'll explain. So I think it is necessary that we cooperate. And I think in our Catholic faith, we think of like, we don't think about sanctification as a thing that happens to us. It's like a thing that happens in us. Because it's not something, so I think there are certain belief systems where like to be sanctified and therefore like sort of worthy of heaven or able to enter heaven, like someone needs to like throw like a cloth over you so that you disguise yourself as a righteous person and then you can go into heaven, right? So like righteousness or like sanctification is a thing that happens to you. But I think in the Catholic faith, we don't believe that. We believe that sanctification is a process that happens with our cooperation, and without our cooperation, then sanctification doesn't happen. And therefore, part of the answer to who brings about transformation is us. But our part in it is actually very small. Okay, so I said it's small, but it's necessary. Yeah. So transformation does require real change in our lives. So sadly, we do need to change our lives, and I need to stop being so addicted to YouTube. Anyway, yeah, real change in our lives. And it's what's required of us is a conversion, and a daily conversion. Conversion does not mean today I am a sinner and tomorrow I will be a saint. Rather, it is an awareness of our weakness and our need for God, our desire for wholeness, and our openness to grace. So this is, in essence, our cooperation. To be aware of our weakness and how much we need God, and to desire that, and to be open to how His grace wants to work in us. And conversion means that we are willing and free to change. So it's not really that our cooperation is like, I go and do holy stuff. It might be, but just doing the holy stuff doesn't necessarily mean that you are becoming more holy, because it also has to do with what stuff is God inviting me to do, and saying a yes to that, rather than saying a yes to what I think God wants me to do. I hope I'm making that clear. If it's making you more confused, you can just throw that aside. Yeah. Okay. And in her last line, she says, since we come from God, our incomplete lives today are destined to be complete in God tomorrow. But I think her sense of today and tomorrow are like pretty far apart. But maybe they aren't. Yeah, if God willed it, I think we could be converted quickly, but I think He wants us to cooperate with Him, and so He's patient with us. Yeah. Okay, so I think this is the last slide. Yeah. Okay, so what's necessary for transformation and for contemplation, since we talked about them being linked together? So first, undivided focus. And our focus is on, again, like our purpose for all of this is union with God. And to transform ourselves and to have transformation, to transform to be like Him. So it's that union without one being swallowed up by the other, but at the same time, you're transforming into another Christ, right? Into the image of Christ. So we need focus on that. And I think so often it's easy to get carried away or to get distracted by other things that you want to be, right? I get distracted daily about all the things that I want to be, and all the things that I want to do. But there's only one necessary thing. Yeah. Secondly, poverty, which we talked about in a different chapter as well, but poverty and openness. So these two things are related to each other. It's not just a poverty for the sake of poverty, but it's a poverty such that I am more open to receive what God has for me, rather than I'm holding a lot of things. And then God's like, hey, would you like this? Then I'm like, I got all these things in my hands. I cannot receive. So it's about recognizing our dependency on God and creating a space within us so that we can welcome God. And finally, persistence, which for me is the hardest. Okay, persistence. I think the quote previously was useful for this, right? Which is that it's not today I'm a sinner and tomorrow I'm a saint. And if we think that way, then we are like destined for disappointment. Or maybe, maybe that's possible for you. I don't know. God can do crazy things. But yeah, transformation is not so much a process or a method. Okay, I don't know whether this quote will be super helpful, because like sometimes it confuses me, but sometimes it helps. So transformation is not so much a process or a method, but a redirection of our life's energy. Redirection of our life's energy. And this life's energy is the spirit of life that enlightens our minds and transforms our hearts as dwelling places of God. Okay. I think the key word here is like our life's energy, like your whole life, like everything that you do is now redirected. So it's not just to focus on one process or one method, or like one half an hour a day or one hour a day, but like the whole of your life's energy is now redirected towards what's necessary for your transformation. Yeah. And to persist in it. And to constantly, like, when the direction starts to go a bit off, then you redirect again. Yeah. Okay. So I think that is all. If I'm not wrong, this is my last slide. Is it my last slide? Yes, it is my last slide, because that's the discussion questions. Okay, great. So this is how we're going to do this. I think then we'll share the live stream adoration link. Everyone else here, I think, Vanessa, would you be able to stay in the room? Yeah, okay, so yeah, so if you'd like to leave your stuff here and only bring a few things, you can, because there'll be someone in the room to watch your stuff. But yeah, SPP is a little bit cold, so if you're like sensitive to cold, you may want to bring a jacket. That's about it. But everyone else, enjoy your adoration session. I hope it's a fruitful time of contemplation for you. Yeah.